Okay. Welcome, everyone, to Isolation Break, Volume 5. I'm Ravi Shankar. I had to rock this mask that I got from a friend, Michael No. I guess all the profits go to the LA Food Bank, 100% of them. Welcome to the latest iteration of Isolation Break. This is a co-production between the Asia Pacific Writers and Translators, APWT, and the New York Writers Workshop, and NYWW, both available online. So I encourage you to follow them. We've been doing this for now. When we first started Isolation Break, we thought that we'd maybe do a couple of episodes, and little did we realize that here we would be in September, still going strong. But the great benefit is that we've been able to host writers from around the world as we are today. So for Joe and I, it's in the early morning. We're having our coffee. And then Faye's in the Philippines. Elizabeth is in Spain, I think, and Joshua in Singapore. So a truly international contingent here. And we'll have time for Q&A at the end of this. I hope that if you have any comments or you want to just give a shout out, you will. You can follow along on Facebook and add any comments. And I think we'll start with our first reader of the morning or evening, as the case might be. So we're very lucky to have Faye Olayo, a writer, performer, and storyteller. She's a member of the Writers Collective, Uba Cordia Young Writers, and the Baguio Writers Group. She's performed at various events and stages across the Philippines and in Southeast Asia. And she just recently released her first album of spoken word called Body of Work. She's currently co-creating and co-hosting the Little Brown Podcast, a podcast about Indigenous experience in the homeland and the diaspora. And so welcome, Faye, in the beautiful studio that you're in.
Hi, hello, hi Ravi, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. So yes, I hijacked a studio.
Oh, you're solo now, Faye. You got the big screen. Faye? You with us?
What happened?
I don't know. You just went blank for a second, but you're welcome to begin whenever you like.
Sorry about that. I saw everyone disappear and I panicked and I'm like,
oh no, what? I should have told you. Yeah, no, I was just giving you the you get the whole screen.
Oh, okay. I was like, what's happening? Okay, here we go. Yeah, so I am reading two works from my my very first spoken word album, which is called The Body of Work. It's available on Bandcamp. Just look for Faye Olayo Bandcamp. So I'm reading two pieces from that album. This first one is called A History of Brown Bodies. The body as object, museum artifact, ethnographic study, the body as abject, exposition attractions, human zoos, cultural performers, the body as subject, little brown brother, unchristianized savage, dead amigo, the body as tool, an extension of a weapon, marching uniforms buried in a flag, the body as evidence, a canvas of wounds in shades of blue, blood trickling a river across the skin, the body as absent, the missing, the unmarked graves, the disappeared, the body as protest, this inherited struggle, this fight in the veins, this skin, this skin, this skin. The next piece that I'm reading is still a piece from the album, and this is the first piece and the one that ties the entire album together. So this is one of my favorite pieces of the album too. It's called Magic. Perhaps the most magical thing I've ever done is to live, to be a woman in a world that keeps telling me, give up, it's too difficult. Perhaps the most magical thing I've ever done is to be daughter, to come from a line of martyrs, of battered wives and abused children. Perhaps the most magical thing I've ever done is to heal. I'm starting to believe that to cure trauma is to go back in time, to exhume the dead, to unearth the gods of my ancestors, to stitch my great-grandfather's head back into place, to unwed my grandmother, to unbirth my mother's husband, or at least to give my father softer hands. Perhaps the most magical thing I've ever done is to survive men, to have been rehabilitation centers for boys addicted to their own ego, drunk off their toxic masculinity, to have been both psychiatrist and couch for all their unresolved issues, to have been halfway house, build them up to be men for the next woman. Perhaps the most magical thing I've ever done is to love anyway. At the departure hall in Nguraray, I am kissing a man I would have easily given my heart to if we weren't flying off to different countries. His mouth unfolds my lips into a spell. It freezes the entire airport. The carousel of luggages come to an abrupt halt. The airplane is stuck on the runway like gum in the back of a flight attendant's stiletto. We let go and open our eyes to time catching up. All the passengers already boarding. A man sitting beside us, uncomfortable witness, shuffles in his seat and asks, "Is it true love?" It isn't. It's just magic. Thank you.
Bravo. Thank you so much, Faye. That was wonderful. And
Thank you.
we will have a chance at the end to have a Q&A and kind of talk a little bit more. You can tell us a little more about what's happening in the Philippines. So thank you so much for that. Okay. I'm Ravi Shankar. For those of you who are joining me, this is Isolation Break, Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and New York Writers Workshop co-production. And next up, I'm very happy to introduce my friend from Iowa. He and I think it's the earliest for us here at 8 o'clock.
Just past 7.
Joe Milan. And Joe was done a lot of amazing things. He was the David T.K. Wong Creative Writing Fellow at the University of East Anglia, a fiction editor at Witness, and an MFA graduate of Vermont College of Fine Arts. And he taught in Korea for 9 years. His fiction has appeared in places like the Rumpus, the Flexible Persona, LA Review of Books, the Kyoto Journal, and more. And Joe will tell us a little bit about what he's working on now. So welcome, Joe. It's great to have you.
Hi, everybody. For today, I'm going to be reading a segment of Under the Umbrella. It's one of the pieces in the upcoming anthology Meridian, which Ravi is part of, and AWPT and the whole crew. So yeah, what this is about is when you live in Korea, at least a few years ago, I assume it's still going on, there are these periodic sirens. They used to be monthly, but I believe now it's like every 6 months. And they are warning sirens for possible attack. So in 2010, North Korea did attack. They shelled Yeongbyon Island in the sea west of Seoul. 4 died, 19 were wounded. The battery on the island returned fire and claimed they had killed more than the North had. The next few nights, we non-soldiers worried and prophesized war in bars. The US soldiers were nowhere to be found. Between games of pool, a Canadian said tanks shook his cupboards open on their way north. While grabbing darts from the board, a Brit said President Lee Myung-bak vowed full-scale retaliatory strike, and only Obama was holding him back. That night, I sat out on my balcony and thought I heard military helicopters thumping and fading into dark, heading north. Later, at a fried chicken joint, I asked my girlfriend, a South Korean, about it. Same stupid shit, she said, like always. If the Koreas make the news, it's because the North did something. American news channels book hours of fear-dealing commentators, none of whom ever seem to have lived or worked in Korea or been a citizen. Worried, they ask the same questions. What should America and China do? When will the North Korean madmen attack America and our freedoms? Sometimes they cut to a reporter on the streets of Seoul and ask, how are they taking it? In the unfocused background, people hurry to catch buses. High school couples hold hands, vendors sell snacks, and the elderly occupy the parks. The reporter disappointingly admits, well, it's business as usual. There's always an undertone to the usual. Below the sizzling meat in restaurants, there's a bass hum, similar to families whispering about their estranged. An Uncle Donnie who bankrupted another business, or maybe a Cousin Stevie who's a closeted racist and robbed a Burger King. We all know that bad kinfolk tone that echoes shame and drips fatigue within a husk of hope. The usual business has included nightmares of North Korean commando squads attacking the Blue House, South Korea's White House, trying to assassinate the South Korean president, then dictator Park Chung-hee. It has included burrowed invasion tunnels under the DMZ, bombed diplomatic delegations, bombed planes, DMZ firefights, kidnappings, assassinations, and more. What is often lost on journalists who cover this story is that these very real threats fuel the fear needed to support dictators, the same that had kept South Korea locked into a cycle of one authoritarian leader after another. The enemy will come after you, your children, your stuff. Only the dictator can save you. Only he can make Korea safe again. The drills remind them once nearly every month. The people huddled in shelters after the siren wails while the army and police marched the streets and fighters screamed through the air. But fear gets stale and wears out. Fear numbs. Once that happens in a country claiming to be a republic, people start demanding real civil rights and real elections. By the close of the 1980s, South Koreans had fought through smoking tear gas and police skirmish lines and created a fledgling democracy. South Koreans continue to scrape away the stains of dictators from the halls of government, most recently with the impeachment and arrest of President Park Geun-hye, the daughter of the longtime dictator Park Chung-hee. The scars of fear still remain like the sirens, like Yeongpyeong Island. Yet, I've never met or read about a Korean prepper stocking jars of kimchi and bags of rice in a homemade bunker. Instead, the city of Seoul and its suburbs continue to grow under the artillery umbrella. It is not because people don't realize what could happen. Everyone sees the air raid shelter signs in the subways, the billboards of hotlines to call about any suspicious activity, and all Korean men have mandatory military service. Maybe it's the distance from the nightmare. Only grandparents remember what it's like to flee back and forth during war. Even then, when that generation utters the enemy, they don't mean the North Koreans, they mean the Japanese. And for them, having seen such drastic growth after the wildfires of war, it may seem silly to hide again in shelters for a drill in a time when the threat barely flickers. It could be the sense of lingering powerlessness. As Korea was being torn apart by the Americans and Soviets after World War II, Koreans had a saying that they were merely a shrimp among whales. A people once helpless to define their own fate from colonization, from Cold War influence, perhaps got into the habit of believing in helplessness. However, I suspect Koreans realize too well what happens when you allow your society to be dictated by fear. They prepare, yes, but the people, especially the younger generations, don't fearmonger as a pastime. They're busy working, living, suspicious of anything that sounds like government propaganda. they have learned. There is also a deeper scar. Korean men feel its ache during their military service, every time they aim their rifles down the shooting range and see the targets. Photos of North Korean soldiers who look so much like their brothers, uncles, cousins, themselves. Whenever Americans become enamored with Korean culture, they often point to the term Han, which vaguely translates as the helpless, unrelenting sorrow of the Korean people. It seems romantic or poetic to the American ear. Now, imagine you're 18, going to the shooting range daily. Stare down the sights of your rifle. Home in on the photos of your cousin, aunt, uncle, mother, father, sister, brother, and squeeze the trigger so that one day you won't flinch to kill a family member if you need to. This is Han. Thank you. Can't see you yet, Ravi.
All right, Joe. Thank you for that. And tell us, is that coming out somewhere?
Yeah, that's part of the anthology, the
Meridian.
Meridian.
Oh, that's in Meridian, of course.
Yes.
Yes. Under the umbrella. Yes. Yeah. And so I should say, thank you so much, Joe. I'm Ravi Shankar. This is Isolation Break at APWT, New York Writers Workshop co-production. Joe just mentioned Meridian, which is a Drunken Boat APWT anthology of new writing, and that will be out in November. But right now, you should check out the Bangalore Review, which has a Step Outside the Frame, a special folio of members of APWT. And the New York Writers Workshop, I should mention, has a presence at the Brooklyn Book Festival, which is coming up next weekend. And so I'm really excited to have Elizabeth J. Woods, who's here from Spain. She's a literary fiction writer and blogger. She was recently shortlisted for the Aurora Prize for Fiction and featured as an emerging author at APWT in China in 2019. Her short fiction has been published in the Griffith Review, VoiceWorks, and she was shortlisted for the Best Fiction Prize in Express Media. Currently, she splits her time between Australia, the UK, and Spain, and she regularly performs her work at spoken word events, including the Wolf Pack with Desperate Literature. And her writing focuses mainly on young women surviving the modern world. There's a lot to survive right now, that's for sure. So welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hi. Hi. Yeah, so I was spending my time between those three countries, but obviously I'm trapped a little bit now here in Madrid, but that's okay. It's sunny. I have a mimosa. I'm happy. So really happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I apologize. I have a little bit of a 6-week-old puppy running around, but hey. I've chosen to read a piece that was published in the Griffith Review. It talks about a time when I graduated from university and the mining boom was happening in Australia, in Western Australia. And I was skint, I was broke, so I headed off there to make some cash. And yeah, this piece came from that. So it's called Fit In or Fuck Off. I didn't understand what the Pilbara was. I didn't even know how to spell Karratha properly. I didn't care about shell middens and Aboriginal petroglyphs and preservation. I just wanted money. Welcome to K-Town. My uncle releases me from a stiff high-vis grip. You're in for a shock. We both laugh and look out to the balding garden as if to reassure ourselves that we were in the middle of nowhere. Patches of red soil push over the foreign greenery and the black dog is dead still under the shade of my cousin's trampoline. We'll take you to the pub tonight. The first 2 weeks we drink and explore. My auntie is a residential miner's wife, relocated from Perth by the company, and my auntie is bored. We drive out to see the ancient rock art. My arm aches after 5 minutes of swatting about my face and it's stupid hot, but then I see them. Faint 5,000-year-old kangaroos and emus etched on the flat sides of terracotta rock, the strange white man with the hat. I grasp in some way the vastness, my pink Adidas trainers on these brickish boulders, my silly mark on a meaningful landscape, and the flies don't piss me off anymore. I didn't know the earth could be so red, like ground cinnamon, and it clusters under my unpainted nails. The land is flat, but for boulders and faint brown hills in the distance. Not long after knockoff, the sky boasts scattered pink and rusty sunsets you only see pictures of in Perth's high-rise offices. The rawness is unexpected and doesn't always seem real. I talked to my auntie and uncle about it later, the surreal feeling of the place, the big money, the big drinking, and the thousands of fluoro vests flying into this small red town every week. My uncle leans forward. This isn't real life. We all look the same. We hear the reverse bleep of utes whilst we brush our teeth in the bathroom light and burn our tongues on coffee hastily made before the horn. We half clamber in untied steel caps down the driveway to the back seat. An engineering contracts manager picks me up before 4:30 a.m. and I can smell their sleep and breath from the back seat like a teenage boy's bedroom in the morning. The closeness of men is becoming normal. The dead straight causeway to the gas plant is a 15-kilometer queue of flagpoles glowing orange in headlights. Those that aren't driving sleep or grin and tell other passengers they've only got 3 or 4 days until they can fly the fuck out of this shithole. Drivers peek through smears of condensation on windscreens. It's nearly 30 degrees outside and the time display hasn't cracked 5 a.m. They avoid speed limits, stay on the safe side. They don't want to get the window seat home. They don't stay slow for the fauna. They don't remember the locals and what Karatha means, sacred earth, God's country. We buy roadies from a bottle shop in Dampier. I learn the phonetic alphabet and how to crack my beer open with a lighter. There's time to get to the Tambray and find a table in the shade with the boys from work. You're usually one of 2 girls at the table, but mostly you're the only one. Cunt doesn't offend you anymore, and you learn quickly not to mention the heat because you sit in an air-conditioned office all day and you don't fucking know what real heat is. There's time to drink 5 or 6 pints at $12.50 a pop and you're in on the rounds without question. There's no time to be a Pilbara princess. It takes a few weeks to realize how many beers you can have after work before you blow numbers in the morning. Readings must be 0.00. Older blokes tell you their tricks for urine tests, how they keep fake piss in their jocks to keep it warm if they're randomly selected for testing. What doesn't take long is for me to realize I like it here. One of our supervisors throws an after party at a company house. He's one of the few that doesn't live in camp. The Tambray kicks us out at 12 a.m. and groups of us stagger and run across the main road to his house. We filter out around 3 a.m. to a bus our superintendent organized with a designated driver. I'm one of the last to walk down the side of the house to the gate, but Lee pushes me up against the wall and kisses me. We both reek of too many Stellas and fags, but the wetness of his tongue excites me. It's not until the morning and the fizz of Barocca that I remember he's married. We fall into a routine. I head to his house after work and sit out the back whilst he phones his wife inside. Then we drink a 6-pack each and fuck in his single bed. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night to his wife's voice. Are you having a fucking affair? I slide out of bed and sit on the toilet naked until he finishes. It's the start of cyclone season and a toolbox meeting is held on site by the safety advisors. Listen, lads, locals are making complaints every rostered day off weekend regarding the behavior of site workers in town. 2 people from another company got a window seat last weekend for fighting. We have to remember that this is their town and we have to respect that. A man mumbles something and those around him snigger. The safety advisor cocks his head. Something you want to share, mate? Yeah, actually, mate. I said they shouldn't be complaining. They'd have fuck all if it wasn't for us working here and spending money in their town. The company's contract on the project finishes and demobilization starts. I cry every time someone leaves. We're family now, and I'm a greenie. A Peggy gives me a hug and tells me she was exactly the same on her first project, but now she's used to it. Then Lee gets his ticket and I drive him to the airport. He grabs my knee in the car. I'd never get a girl like you back home. I write him a letter and go to Bali on a cheap plane full of FIFOs to get over it. Lima, echo, echo. I must write this in case I don't. I don't think I loved you. Smoke got in my eyes. It's a childhood thing, not knowing what I wanted and not knowing or getting to know if I ever really wanted it anyway. Because you don't belong to me and you won't. So let's clink Harry Potter goblets of Stella and kiss in our red dusty dream. Let's fuck on a bed of Ted's hair and Sylvia's bones. Let's argue about a radio station that never existed. We'll meet in Milton's Paradise Lost, smiling without wrinkles at a groundhog Pilbara sunset we pretended wasn't tempting, beautiful. And we'll love the uncertain certainty of that sore orgasm that never happened because of timing, but we knew it would eventually. We'll be the great pretenders like lonely boys, and I'll buy you $20 cigarettes in a service station on a cloud. You can pay me back in Monopoly money. We'll be as selfish as we proclaimed selfishly in the transit donger we crashed without a key once upon a time in Never Neverland. Let's pretend we both left with a six-pack. We booked a follow-up appointment. We understood the ending from a plane ride, a beer, and a fag in, but we didn't. I took the wrong exit on the northwest coastal highway and couldn't afford the petrol anyway. Echo, Lima, Indigo, Zulu, Alpha, Bravo, Echo, Tango, Hotel. Thank you.
Wow, thank you for that. Yes, you deserve a mimosa after that.
Yeah, straight in there.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Ooh,
that was wonderful.
thank you.
And, I'm Ravi Shankar. Again, if you're just joining us, this is Isolation Break. This is number 5, still going. So check in each month at AP Writer, Asia Pacific Writers and Translators. And the website actually is apwriters.org. You can find out a lot more about the organization, which I like to call a kind of Asian AWP. But the sense of community, I think, is in many ways much stronger. So our final reader of this morning, I'm very excited to have among us. I don't think I've seen Joshua since Guangzhou. Joshua Ip is Singaporean poet, editor, and a literary organizer. He's edited 9 anthologies and written 4 poetry collections, most recently Footnotes on Falling. He co-founded Sing Lit Station, an overactive literary charity that runs community initiatives including Singpo Remo, the Hawker Prize for Southeast Asian Poetry. This is a great endeavor indeed. And Singlet Body Slam, the world's only performance poetry, professional writing, hybrid performance. So welcome, Joshua. It's great to have you.
Hello, everyone. Just checking you can hear me. All right. I'm going to be sharing some translations. I don't know about everybody else, but during this whole lockdown, quarantine, COVID period, I've been having trouble writing myself. But what's really been unlocking for me is reading other people's work and finding ways to just shift that through different languages to bring that to new people. And so I'm going to be sharing mainly translations today, a bunch of different ones across different languages. So the first one is actually a Chinese poem by this poet called Xi Xin. So I'm going to read the original Chinese and then my translation shortly after that. So it's called 灯亮了 by Xi Xin. 先生忽然莫名紧张，说隔壁的灯亮了，他要举报外地回来，硬自动隔离14天。我走出屋子，发现除了隔壁，前后左右，整座华侨城都亮了。And in English, that's the lights are on. Xi Xin. The mister, mysteriously flustered by the lights coming on next door, wants to escalate the issue. Those returning should isolate themselves for 14 days. I leave the house and find, besides next door, before and after, on every side, the entire city, Chinese, is alight. I'm going to read another Chinese poem, this one by a dead Chinese poet who wrote during the Tang Dynasty, Du Fu, who's one of the most famous Tang Dynasty poets. And so I'm going to read it in the original Chinese, Then I'm going to read like a basic, like more or less literal translation, and I'm going to read a contemporary translation because the language is written in this very terse and constrained form that needs a little bit of translation to modern times. So it's called 宋元 by 杜甫。带甲满天地，胡为君远行。亲朋尽亦哭，暗马去孤城。草木岁月晚，关河霜雪清。别离已昨日，应见故人情。Simple translation in English is "Send off before a long journey" by 杜甫. The world is full of warriors in armor, so why leave for a long journey? Friends and family are all in tears as I saddle my horse and ride to the lone city. The grass and trees are withered at the end of a season. The mountains and rivers are cold, with frost and snow flying through them. Even though our parting happened yesterday, when I look at this scene, I still feel sorrow. And a bit of a modern contemporary translation inspired by Lei. Your message is taking longer than usual to send. 杜甫. In this land of masks and scrubs, how dare one leave the house? As my phone buzzes with worry, I drive alone through lockdown city. The vegetable markets lie desolate. The streets are swept snow clean. Though the quarantine ended yesterday, this morning I think of 杜甫's poem. Okay, I'm going to hop a little bit away from Chinese into languages that I don't really understand. So this is actually a translation of a poem called Jalur Kuningan No. 0 by Ratri Niditya, who is a Jakarta poet in Indonesia, and it's a translation from Bahasa Indonesia. Her first collection is called Rusu Nothing, and it's published in Jakarta. Jalur Kuningan No. 0. Seperti ayah dan ibu, kita juga sedang menua. Dan sembari menua, kita kehilangan kesempatan. Kita akan duduk di sebuah bangku di dalam halte yang terang. Kita akan duduk selamanya sambil sesekali melambaikan tangan batas ada dua orang di jam-jam pulang kantor. Tanganku yang satunya memegang tanganmu yang satunya. Namun mereka akan memalingkan muka karena kita terlihat seperti semua orang yang menunggu giliran. Di saat semua mata mendapat layar ponsel yang berbina, kita berdua diam-diam merasa sepi. And in English, Jalan Kuningan No. 0. Like Ayah and Ibu, we also are aging. And while aging, we miss our buses. We will sit on a bench in a stop, well lit. We will sit forever, once in a while waving at 1, 2 people coming home from the office. This other hand, mine, holding this other hand, yours. Yet they will turn away because we look like everyone else waiting their turn. When everyone's eyes are staring at the blinking cell phone screen, both of us, hush hush, felt lonely. Okay, hopping away from Asia, I've also been working on some translations from a friend, Nalan Matos, who is a Brazilian poet. So I'm not going to read the original Portuguese because I'm just going to mangle it, but I'm going to read the English translation of our Cordillera, which is the mountain range. Surmounting the days and nights starless, autumnless, chartless, exitless. On foot I crossed the range of my existence, with only loneliness to be my muse. Absent caresses, the hard hours deserted, the lowlands rugged and the farms uncertain, the merciless exactitude of the passage, so many fields incapable of dreams. I testify the roads, the lives, the halting, the gardens, so many people left in ruins. I behold the terrible canto of the birds who crow about the trivia of things. On my skin, this memory, severe seclusion, and all that I have lived will follow me, traversing streets uncertain of my life, with only loneliness to be my muse. And I'm going to end this bunch of translations with a sequence by Pierre Vinclair, who is a French poet who used to stay in Singapore, but has recently moved to London. And he recently wrote a series of 40 sonnets during the quarantine in London, and he wrote one per day. So this series actually tracks him watching through the beginning of the quarantine and himself catching COVID on day 5 and recovering from it on day 10. And it's called La Confinement du Monde, which is the confinement of the world. So again, I'm not going to read the French because I don't speak French. I'm going to read maybe 3 of the sequence in English, and they're all sonnets. So, Pierre Vinclair, number 2. Over the confines of the cinema, we chose the park. Across, serious Sainsbury shoppers came, heaped triple ply with TP. The well-fluffed anus of the anima is irritated. Kids splutter and yell, contagion on the slides, audacious in the knowledge they can scrub their palms, then fingers in a hydroalcoholic jizz of gel. The post this morning, hipster smoker fumed, leaving as I went in, jabbing his barrel virally at me. Ahem, ahem. In extremis, I escaped the ball of doom, because, bemusement in the face of peril, I held my breath, what cheek, and wiped at them. Day 10. Tuesday, I found the cat in my throat. An invite to these muscle aches, this coughing, these migraines. Then back to normal. My wife worries. I declaim I'm fine. Thumbs up. It's Thursday in full flight, before revisiting these Friday pains, searching for breathlessness on the internet. Saturday, half-eating plate, a fading coronet. I wait for the day of the Lord you take in vain. Today is better. It is probably that, my sister says. The short straw, I cry. Why do I care, you ask, keen reader, what that means? Fuck off. See, we just passed time, you and me, on either side of this sonnet's quarantine. Day 14. To celebrate my vigor reawakened, I hum Elton's I'm Still Standing. A duo of alto thrush, mezzo-soprano sparrow accompany us to our lockdown secret garden. Within these 8 by 6.2 green limits, a giant bee hums, everything is awesome, looting the tulips' petticoats in bloom, looping figure 8s through the gaudy red light district. Chirping over the shaggy salad leaves, Amel tilts a petite strawberry face above her school uniform, a memory in cotton. If the lockdown lasts, soon she will forget. Past this paradise, another place still lies in waiting for the fall of Eve. And the last piece is day 20, which is a villanelle. If you're my prisoner, then I'm your hostage. I but a fish, my waters agitate. When you roar on edge, a panther in a cage. You ask, how long more? How much more stoppage? Eternity already, no end date. If you're my prisoner, then I'm your hostage. The chores, the meals, the domicile menage, you throw yourself into your new mandate. When you roar on edge, a panther in a cage. I please myself, erecting one more page of poem apparatus to operate. If you're my prisoner, then I'm your hostage. No other enterprise I dare engage. Curious children could gather and spectate. When you roar on edge, a panther in a cage. Damn this phage, I wage a savage rage. You rampage, I'll do damage, demonstrate. If you're my prisoner, then I'm your hostage. When you roar on edge, a panther in a cage. All right, and that's a whole bunch of random translations. I guess I should talk a little bit about the process and method. So besides Chinese, I don't really speak Portuguese or French or Bahasa Indonesia. And what I've been doing is really just using machine translation, running stuff through Google Translate and working through the meanings of the text with the source poet. And I think that's more of a modern approach to translation, to try and build borders where otherwise none exist. Not to devalue the expertise of professional translators who know both languages, but I think it's useful and actually a useful experiment for most modern poets to just try and bring poems from other languages into yours. Okay, and I can maybe read one last piece if Tim wants a...
I just wanted to pop on, Joshua. There's a request for you to read one of your hilarious poems that confront the mysteries of contemporary romance. Maybe...
Okay.
I remember you have the series about the sex life of electronic objects. Right? But anyway, whatever you like. I just wanted to know there's a shout out and a call from the audience, a request.
Okay. Yeah, all right. I guess this goes out to Tim Tomlinson. And I'll find you a love poem, or rather a strange love poem. And this one's called Mood Lighting Modern Restaurant. In memory of the time where we could all go to restaurants and they were packed. Mood lighting, modern restaurant. Your lips were moving, but all I remember is the Chinese restaurant had these ludicrous light bulbs in bird cages that weren't even lit. The bar's filtering speech, Ian from the office, something promotion, something cocksucker, too dim to read the menu, so you pointed. I lip-synced while also pointing, in case the server was a lip reader or the man at the next table eyeing your mouth. How liquid passes between people in lieu of intimacy, even close friends, and you were never close-mouthed. Perhaps why I have never thought of kissing you, not least with your mouth full of anecdotal information. Imagine the creation of Adam, God and man pointing at an invisible menu waiting for service. They will be having us order from apps next. Some phone hacker will invent one that projects a menu on the table in light. In protest, the fidelity of form. You'd like him. Did you know the cages have no bottoms? All this time I've been thinking of newborn bulbs, making their first tentative flaps over the city, gathering their strength in great glowing arcs, shitting unasked for illumination over pedestrians making out in dark alcoves. Thank you very much.
All right, bravo. Thank you to all of our readers. This is Isolation Break number 5 at Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and New York Writers Workshop co-production. And I think today's video is a perfect example of the kind of range of voices, really brilliant voices from the region that participate in the organization. So thank you all for that. And I wanted to, wow, there's so much to talk about. I mean, all of those were such powerful readings, but maybe we should just begin with just a kind of wellness check. I mean, I know all of us are in different states, and I know it's been a pretty stressful few months. I mean, how are you all doing? Tell us a little bit about where you are and how things are going, both personally and collectively. Faye, do you wanna let us know how you're doing?
Yeah, I can go first, and then let's just set the darkest tone. Yeah, it's not looking very good here in the Philippines. We have the highest number of cases. We have 300,000 cases, confirmed cases as of today, and that the numbers are still rising because there's a giant need for mass testing. There's a giant need for testing to be more accessible to people and to have better regulations when it comes to distancing and just basically safety and health and all of that. So that's put the collective Filipino at such an anxious state, and you can really feel it. Like, people are getting very antsy and are getting very frustrated with what's been happening. So I think I'm coping as much as I can, as anybody can in this situation.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I should just mention we were not joined today by Chris Raja. He has some family issues, so we're all thinking about him. Hopefully, Chris will join us another time. So, well, thank you, Faye. And how about you, Joe?
Well, I moved during all this from England to Iowa, and I had to self-quarantine in Atlanta, so I got a different perspective than I think I would have gotten just staying in one place. And it's besides what everyone already knows, the part that was mind-blowing is you can't buy furniture. You go to IKEA, the warehouse is empty, or if you order stuff, I ordered a couch and it didn't come with one of the armrests. It came with 2 right armrests and not the left one. And it's these small things that we used to accept, that things worked, things got there on time or within a week or whatever. Nothing works right. At least my experience coming back to America, and that doesn't seem to make any sort of news. I mean, of course, it's not severe as death, but our day-to-day lives are completely different, it feels.
Yeah, it's odd. There's been a run on. I mean, I've heard bicycles are out of stock. You can't buy bikes here, and I mean, Clorox wipes and all of that. Of course, those are gone. But when canned food starts disappearing, man, we're really in for some apocalyptic times, it seems. Joshua, you're in Singapore, right? I know Singapore, because of the control there, probably has things pretty well in hand, but how are things going?
We're in a much better place than we used to be. I guess we got pretty much a surge of cases early on, but we've more or less kept things in check. But I guess the stuff that's mainly notable about COVID in Singapore is that there's a huge outbreak in the migrant dorms. So while normal Singaporeans have barely been affected by COVID-19, the migrant workers who are living in pretty packed spaces, mostly of South Asian origin, have been getting it pretty bad. So of the 50,000 cases that we have, most are from the dorms. So that really just exposes the different worlds that exist in Singapore, the pretty happy, rich, affluent Singaporeans who are living our lives, and the migrant workers who are effectively building Singapore on very low salaries, who get the rough end of the stick. So that's just something that's becoming a larger area of consciousness for us these days.
Yeah, I remember walking around Singapore on the market day and seeing an entire different side of Singapore, and so many South Asian. And maybe you could start for, do you want to say something about the work you do with the Hawker Award?
I might not mention the Hawker Prize right now because that's rather on hiatus. Okay. But instead, actually, Singlet Station is raising funds for an activity called One Book, One Bag. So it's actually a charity set up by a migrant worker in Singapore to bring books to migrant workers in the dorms. And as you know, a lot of them are quarantined right now. They can't leave the dorms and they can't go to work. They can't do anything. They're just stuck in these tiny spaces. And so we're bringing books to them to read. And we've been able to get lots of donations of English books and like Chinese books and Tagalog and a bunch of other languages. But we have large shortages of Bengali books and Hindi books. So that covers like the bulk of the books that they prefer. And so we're raising funds for that. If you go to giving.sg and search for One Book, One Bag, that fundraiser is still going on for the next 5 days. So any amount you can chip in will be really a great help to give migrant workers some good stuff to read.
Great, and I'll try to put that in the comments as well, so people can check that out.
Populink.
Yeah, Populink, please. And finally, it sounds you have an enviable nomadic life, usually, Elizabeth. I mean, Australia and UK and Spain, but now are you kind of stuck in Spain? I mean, what's happening?
Yeah. I'm in Madrid. Yeah, I'm in Madrid. I started living in Madrid last October and was traveling a lot to Switzerland for work and back to the UK where I'm from. Obviously, Australia is a little bit more of a trek. And so we went into full lockdown March 13th, where we were way before, I think, a lot of countries, if not, we were one of the first. And it was pretty severe, but had to be done. And then we came out in June, phase by phase, and now we're seeing the numbers really rising again. To mirror what Josh was saying, it's really dense, and the case numbers are really dense in the lower socioeconomic areas. They're the people that need to get out to work, because if they don't work, they don't get any money. And there's a lot of protesting going on here, which I am completely sympathetic with. It's the cases are just rapidly increasing in these areas around Madrid again. So yeah, it's not getting any better.
Yeah, and absolutely cast a light on the kind of divide that exists, right? I mean, the people who have to provide the services so others can self-quarantine, right?
Like drive the metros, like drive the buses, clean the hospitals, they're the ones that are at risk, and it's bullshit.
Yeah. And of course, I think U.S. and elsewhere, they're primarily populations of color, and so it just it is casting a light on that. And speaking of which, Joe, you said, because you moved to Iowa, you've lived in Korea and in many cosmopolitan places, and you were mentioning in Iowa you were driving on the road and you see this huge Confederate flag.
It was on the border between Illinois and Kentucky, some place called Paducah. It's cosmopolitan, I'm sure. I think I know nothing about Paducah, but it was the largest Confederate. It was one of the largest flags I've ever seen in my life, and it happened to be Confederate. And it was towering above an American flag, and I believe like a Kentucky flag. And I think I was before we started, I was talking about how I've been struggling to write, and I keep on going into rants, and I keep on fixating on this giant flag because I just came back from abroad. And seeing that right off a major interstate highway, it's things changed in a year, like dramatically. I thought things were pretty contentious before I left, but I mean, Confederate flags off interstates. I mean, that to me is obviously, as a person of color, is not the welcoming way I was expecting. But to be fair, here in Iowa, I haven't seen any Confederate flags. So there's that.
There's that great essay by David Foster Wallace about after 9/11.
9/11, yeah.
Yeah, wasn't that in Iowa when he's looking to see where he can buy an American flag, right? All his neighbors, it just pops up, and he feels like he'll be unpatriotic if he doesn't produce one immediately. Yeah, I grew up in Northern Virginia too, and I didn't really even realize Virginia was a southern state until I went to the University of Virginia, and then there were Confederate flags, and people called the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression. But that was a long time ago, and so to think that in 20 years things haven't really changed, and in some ways have gotten worse is a little depressing. Are there? I mean, Joshua, you kind of mentioned. I know that. Is there a way in which the migrant workers are being politically mobilized in any fashion or given a collective voice?
Unfortunately, because they're not citizens, so they don't have the chance to vote. So a lot of the mobilization has been done by NGOs and charities who've been trying to actually mobilize on their behalf against the government. But in Singapore, I guess the government tends to try and run everything. So if there's going to be a solution to the situation right now to improve living conditions, it will have to be led by the government in some shape or form. So while we can make noise and demonstrate and help on the margins, ultimately what really changes things is political will, which I do see is shifting towards their side at this point.
You do? Okay. What about you, Faye? I mean, what has Duterte's response been in the face of all of this? I mean, is there any unified response or?
What response? Oh God. So in a nutshell, what Duterte has done since the pandemic happened was to request for more emergency powers, and these emergency powers have granted him basically has allowed him to militarize the cities and further into the provinces to just spread. There's military people everywhere you go. There are cops, there are military men, there are and they can do anything. They can basically strip and search you. They can shoot you down if they want. That's happened. People still have recently this Monday was the commemoration of Ferdinand Marcos' declaration of martial law 48 years ago. And so there have been mobilizations happening because we've seen such a mirror image of what happened then to what's happening now. The biggest public broadcasting network has been shut down by the administration, and that is one of the ways in which people access information. It's so important now because there's a pandemic happening. People need information. People need access to information, and that's gone. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the other kind of sub-threads of this moment is the kind of assault on journalism that's been happening all over the world. Certainly in the U.S., there's been a kind of sustained assault, so that conspiracy theories have become kind of mainstream news in a lot of places. Elizabeth, what about for you in Spain? I mean, do you feel like you're pretty well accepted there and feeling like there's a community there that feel supportive?
Yeah, for sure. The Spanish people are wonderful people. It's a culture that reminds me of Australia a lot. Actually, they're very super friendly, super welcoming. It's a really beautiful, tight, family-oriented culture. And so in terms of, do I feel accepted as a Madrid citizen or as a writer, as what? yeah, it's an incredible place to be in for sure. But it's also, yeah, it's. I can't think of a government that's handled this well. New Zealand, maybe,
Yeah.
you know, like it's just, you know, Jacinda Ardern, my God, like, but I don't know a government that's handled it well. Pedro Sanchez is just doing the best he can. What can you do, you know?
I saw this.
They can do a lot. Yeah, they can do a lot.
I saw this interesting statistic, which said it was like the 8 countries that have had the best COVID response and what they all shared. Do you know what they shared?
Female leaders, yeah.
Female leaders.
Yeah.
So whether that is an actual correlation or causation, I think it's very interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
So you speak Spanish?
Hablo un poquito. Estoy aprendiendo español. Sí, I'm learning. Yeah, I'm learning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did love, and we can maybe talk about translation a little bit, because I am with Joshua in that I don't think that it's a sacred cow, that there is this idea that translation exists along a spectrum between fidelity to the letter or to the spirit, and I think there are even other alternatives, as you showed us. And so, have you gotten any pushback, Joshua, on translating from languages that you don't know, or?
Not yet, actually. No one's really come out and scolded me about it. I expect there to be some pushback at some point, but generally it is just another tool. If you're using a English-Chinese dictionary or rhyming dictionary or thesaurus, all of these are just variations of a weaker form of Google Translate. So if you're gonna use one, you can use the other. As long as you have intimacy, knowledge of text, and the respect to work with the source poet, I think those are the fundamental things. If you're just saying that Google's going to come in and do it automatically for you, that's an entirely different thing from what I'm doing. So ultimately, machine translation is still a tool that you use with discretion and with communication with the actual poet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an advocate of all forms of translation. I mean, homophonic translation. I mean, sometimes I'll have my students do homolinguistic translations, English to English translations, where they're kind of retranslating something into their own speech. Joe, did you ever do any translation work?
Yeah, I was when I was doing my MFA, I went to Slovenia, and I worked with some Slovene writers on translating, and Google Translate was terrible back then. And in Korea, I did a tiny bit. I always felt like that there was plenty of Korean writers who could do it far better than me, and so I kind of I only did that when it was integral to some other project I was working on. But yeah, I mean, just listening to everything that Josh was doing, that was wicked. I really liked it. I liked it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it can be as kind of a contentious source. You know, I've recently had a conversation with an Arabic friend who has taken a lot of issue with Coleman Barks' translations of Rumi. But of course, I don't think Rumi would have had the audience he has without Barks. But I guess in his translations, he strips out any mention of Islam and any other context. He kind of maybe, in my friend's words, overgeneralizes and takes out some of the music of the Arabic language. So, you know, it's something to consider and struggle with. I think. Faye, have you ever translated?
No.
No. Do you speak Tagalog?
Yeah, I do. I speak Tagalog, Ilocano, the regional language in the north, and Kankanaey, my mother's native tongue. So I think that all my works are translations of all the languages I know, and just like written in English because, well, it's practical.
Mm-hmm.
It just reaches more people that way.
Yeah. I mean, I know that we all hope that we could be in Bangalore this year. The APWT conference is not canceled; it's been postponed to next year. But you know, it's so strange. I mean, I don't know what the reverberations will be and what the new normalcy will look like. What are you all doing to kind of to sustain yourself during this moment? I mean, are there any books you're reading or conversations that you're having, or any ways in which you're kind of nurturing your creative and emotional health? I see Elizabeth nodding. What are you doing?
Yeah, so I mean, we touched upon this before we went live, right? About the struggle with writing in quarantine and lockdown, that kind of stuff. But fuck me, I'm consuming literature like nothing else. Like, yeah, I'm really flying through a lot of novels, a lot of nonfiction as well, which I've never really read before. I've been like, fiction girl, short stories, novels, give it to me. But yeah, I've been discovering fabulous writers that I should have discovered so long ago, and watching great documentaries and movies, and I've just been really consuming rather than producing for some reason. I don't know about anyone else, but that's kind of been my mode.
Yeah.
I have a 16-month-old, and so just as she's able to like toddle around, I've been taking her to the woods, and we've been everywhere we've gone. We've been on a pursuit of every swing set in the area, and so this little mission has also led me to kind of like what you were talking about, Elizabeth, about looking at consuming a lot. But I've been consuming not like books I would normally pursue, but like local histories of stuff. So like. Because I don't know if it's true everywhere else or where you guys are, but if you go to a park, like every park bench has like a name on it, or like a bridge I went across the other day has, each of the planks has someone else's name, which of course is, some sort of donor. But I started thinking like, why is this park named Pamela Park? Like, who is Pamela? Hopefully they were a decent person and not just donating money to erase their bad histories. But I've been trying to find a lot of local stuff, which I don't think, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I would have even thought of.
That's here in Madrid, and I think it's definitely the same in London. I'm not sure of other European cities, but there are the blue plaques. They're called the blue plaques, and they're, I live right in the center of Madrid, and you can walk around and you can look up and see where Hemingway rented an apartment here, or there's these like literary plaques of poets, of philanthropists, of novelists that have all lived in these places, and I'd love to touch the house and look up at it, and it's a lovely little bit of local history. I don't know if they have that in other cities. I know Madrid and London for sure.
Wow. And Iowa, I think it's a Sioux word, right? I mean, over half of it's very sad, but the legacy of the indigenous people of America is in the state names. No one even really thinks about it. But it might be interesting, Joe, to kind of check out the native population to see what remains of the Sioux in Iowa.
Well, actually, in this county, I live in Winnebago County, where they make the RVs, and that was a native group that I recently read Dee Brown's "Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee." I think it was from the 80s, and it talked about the Winnebagos, and it was absolutely horrifying. And to think of it that their name has been appropriated for an RV company is, I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The more I read
the Hawkeye kind of Indian mascot, a native mascot?
No, the Winnebagos, it was the name of the tribe. They were here, and during towards the end of the Civil War, they were trying to enforce a treaty where the Americans were not upholding, and they lost. And they were removed, and there are, from what I understood, there are no more Winnebagos. The people are gone.
And they've been replaced by these enormous gas-guzzling vehicles. That actually, there is something really tragic.
So, to bring everyone to, the happy place that Elizabeth brought us to about with blue plaques of literary scholarship. Focus on that. That's less depressing.
Yeah. I mean, what about you, Josh? When you said you mentioned that you have found it really hard to write original stuff in the moment, so you've been doing translation. What other things are you kind of doing to keep that creative flame alive?
I feel like my social life has exploded.
Ah.
I feel like my social life has exploded since COVID-19. simply because it's you have to have groups of 5 people. In the past, you would just go out and you would go for events or like readings and writers things, and you would randomly meet people and say hi and so on and so forth. So you wouldn't really need to plan your social life. But right now, you need to organize events because it's capped at 5. You need to organize every social interaction more or less. And as a result, I'm meeting more people than I used to in the past because I feel more obliged to just pack my days and like figure out when I can meet people. And Zoom just makes it a lot easier to connect across borders, across nations. And I've already talked to so many like college friends from the US that I've not seen for years because of this whole normal to Zoom thing that has been brought about by COVID-19. So I'm actually in a pretty good place socially, almost a bit overwhelmed.
Wow. Anyone else have a response to that? I mean, I have been using Zoom certainly a lot, probably a bit too much, I think, but the reach is wonderful, right? To be able to talk to anyone around the world.
Yeah, definitely.
But I can't say that COVID has been good for my social life.
No, I drink more alone.
What I'd do for some live music.
Oh yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Have Joe, are you in touch with anyone back in Korea?
Yeah, but they're pretty locked down because most of them are not in a position to socialize. They're high risk. And yeah, it doesn't sound like their social lives have gotten better. But apparently they've gotten much better at cooking. So that's a plus. And yeah, like all those home skills that are part of being an adult, it seems like they're all getting better at that. But yeah, people are still pretty careful. I mean, there's, of course, like everywhere, the beginning of the second wave is hitting. So
yeah,
and the fatigue, of course, because people are frustrated. So yeah, it's a worldwide thing.
Well, that's so it's kind of a down note, and I don't want to end on that. So I think maybe in closing, and again, those of you that are just joining us, I'm Ravi Shankar. This is Isolation Break. It's a monthly reading series put on by Asia Pacific Writers and Translators, New York Writers Workshop. Keep your eyes open for both the next event and Meridian, which is an anthology co-published with Drunken Boat, will be out later this year. So maybe in closing, you could just you could leave us with something that you're either working on or that is that you're feeling passionately about, a cause or a project or something that's making your pulse quicken a little bit in this moment. Faye?
So I think one of the better things that happened out of this pandemic and what Joshua was talking about, like his social life exploding, was the podcast that we started. It started from a Zoom call, like me, a friend, and who introduced me to Indigenous people from here who immigrated to the States, and we all went into this Zoom call and we were all talking about like dealing with your Indigenous identity and trying to straddle all the worlds that you have. And then we came up with a podcast, and like there are so many things to talk about, and this is not the best time, but it is kind of like a good opportunity to talk about now. So we've been doing that. We've been creating the podcast, talking about like.
And tell us again the podcast name and where we can listen to it.
So it's called The Little Brown Podcast. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. What's the other one? Basically, where all of your podcasts are available. So we have that, The Little Brown Podcast. It's a podcast about Indigenous people, talking about Indigenous people things. So yeah, I mean, we have a lot of listeners who are non-Indigenous, and they feel like they can relate to some of the things. Is like finding out more about things like who you are and like the way in which that you make your identity, basically.
Thank you so much, Faye. It's been such a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you so much.
And I see a question, or not a question, a suggestion here of a book, The Winnebago Trickster Cycle, which is well worth reading, apparently, if you want to learn more about the Native tribe in Iowa. And maybe we can turn to Joe, and you can let us know what you're up to. I was actually hoping that you had some better news. I'm so excited for your novel Without a Handle. And reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if you know the Vietnamese American writer Quan Barry has this book called Writing In on Sticks about a field hockey team. And I know there's a kind of sports element in your book as well. But you don't have to talk about that. Tell us what you're doing.
I'm shopping around my novel Without a Handle, and it's about a Korean American high school senior who gets deported. His immigration paperwork was never completed because of a bounced check, and his family is poor and lives in a trailer park, and all he wanted to be was a football player, and instead he gets deported to South Korea and conscripted into the South Korean military, and he's trying to get back and figure out who he is while everyone else is telling him who they think he is. And so that's what the novel's about. And yeah, I'm hustling with that. I'm really excited about the Meridian, the Drunken Boat APWT anthology. I'm excited to be a part of that. And also I think on a positive note of all of the things going on right now is people are more socially conscious than ever. And I think this moment, like your podcast, Faye, and the protests, and they're about things that are meaningful that at least I know that in my experience, in my immediate set, was not openly discussed. And I think it's great that like this moment where people are actually trying to make the world better.
Mm.
Yeah, I do think that, and these connections are not, I mean, on the one hand, I think there are also people trying to make the world worse.
Yeah.
But hopefully we can prevail in that. Joshua, anything that you want to leave us with? Tell us, I know you usually have a number of different projects going on at once. You mentioned the Singlet Station, what you're doing with the books. Anything else you want to let us know about?
So I dropped the link for the fundraiser in the comments for buying books for the migrant workers. But I do want to share one other project that we just did during the COVID period when everyone was very full of time. And so that's called the Track Changes Project for Poetry.sg. What we did was actually to invite about 20 poets from Singapore to look for a poem that they had published a long time ago and to actually edit that poem. And to actually write a little mini essay or exegesis to explain why they did those edits.
Mm.
So some chose to write a few paragraphs, some did like inline edits, some did a few screenshots and photographs with handwritten scribblings. So it's a really great exercise for people to just figure out the craft of writing and the craft of editing alongside writing. And some of them actually edited poems that were written 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, that whole range and that perspective that changes over time. So just check that out. I'm going to drop that link in the comments.
Yeah, I love that idea. I mean, when I was putting together my new and selected poems, of course, there's early work that you just cringe to even see. And so to see, maybe can I make it something that I would actually read today? I love that idea. What an interesting exercise. And Elizabeth, how about you?
Well, I haven't done anything as good as that for sure, but I guess creatively, I've been blogging and writing a little bit. I managed to do a little bit of travel just within Spain, and just the feeling of that was quite profound and it felt like such a privilege to be able to visit anything and go anywhere. And so I've been writing around that with the slog of the first draft, as I was telling you earlier, Ravi, always in the background, and trying to put together a book that is a jumble sale of what feels like chapters right now that I need to assort and make sense of, and it spans across the UK and Australia. And I'm still very much in a draft process for that. And but I think the consummation of the consumption of literature and culture I've been doing while stuck inside has really helped the thinking process and being able to read more widely as well, and experience great events like this. I've not done events, but I've joined book launches. I've joined, I've done another reading actually for Desperate Literature here in Madrid. We did an online reading and other kind of live Instagram feeds of writers and processes. There's been a plethora of creative outlets, I think, that I've been able to tap into that I don't think I would have done before, because it was physical, and it was, you know, we weren't thirsty for it as we are now. I feel, and so yeah, it's a process, but I think I'm tracking. I'm pacing through. But yeah, blogging. I have a website, and that's been helping me. It's quite cathartic, and hopefully other people like it too. It's kind of a little spin on women surviving the modern world. So yeah, I'll pop my website in there if anyone's interested.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. This is just has been wonderful. It's early morning for Joe and I, so I'm so glad I got to start my day like this, because I can already think of things that I want to explore after this conversation. So I want to thank all of you again. If you're interested, Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and the New York Writers Workshop, they're both online. Have a wonderful sense of community, which you can become a member of. And this is Ravi Shankar. This has been Isolation Break. Hopefully we'll see you all next time. And thank you all. Stay safe, stay well.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ravi.
you.
Bye. Ciao.